It is the year 750 of the Common Era, and the Tang Dynasty rules China with a golden hand. The Silk Road is at its peak, a web of trails and mountain passes stretching from the markets of Chang'an to the shores of the Mediterranean. And Samarkand sits at its heart, a jewel of turquoise and lapis lazuli gleaming beneath the endless Central Asian sky. Picture the city now, in the pale light before dawn. The great domes and minarets are silhouettes against a sky shifting from indigo to rose. The famous blue tiles of Samarkand, that particular shade of cerulean found nowhere else on earth, catch the first rays of sunlight and seem to glow from within. Gardens of apricot and mulberry trees line the canals that thread through the city, their leaves still dark and heavy with dew. The air smells of wood smoke and baking bread, of roses and the faint dusty sweetness of the desert beyond the valley. In a courtyard house in the merchant's quarter, an oil lamp flickers in a window. This is the home of Vahriz, a Sogdian trader who has walked the Silk Road for 30 years. He is a man in his late 50s now, his beard silvered, his face carved by sun and wind into a map of the journeys he has taken. His hands, though weathered, are gentle, the hands of a man who has learned that patience is worth more than haste, and that kindness opens doors that gold cannot. Vahriz rises before the household stirs. He moves quietly through the dim rooms, past the sleeping forms of servants and relatives, past the storerooms where bolts of silk and sacks of spices wait in fragrant darkness. He steps into the courtyard, where a fountain murmurs softly, and he stands for a moment beneath the fading stars, breathing in the coolness of the morning. Today is the day of departure. In a room across the courtyard, his daughter Faranak is already awake. She sits cross-legged on her sleeping mat, a small chest open before her. Inside are the tools of her trade, ledgers bound in soft leather, bamboo brushes, and cakes of ink, a counting board of polished wood. For 5 years, since her mother passed from a fever that swept through the city, Faranak has kept the family's accounts. She knows the price of silk in a dozen currencies, the exchange rates between Byzantine gold and Chinese bronze, the cost of hiring camels and the tariffs at every checkpoint from here to the gates of Chang'an. But she has never seen these places herself. She has only imagined them, traced their names in her ledgers, listened to her father's stories by the fire. Until now. Faranak is 23 years old, with her mother's dark eyes and her father's stubborn chin. She wears her hair braided and coiled beneath a traveling scarf, and her clothes are practical. A long tunic of undyed wool over loose trousers, boots of supple leather. She is not beautiful in the way poets sing of, but there is something in her face that makes people trust her, a steadiness, an attention, as if she is truly listening when you speak. She closes the chest and ties it securely with cord. Through the window she can hear the sounds of the household waking, the clatter of pots in the kitchen, the voices of the grooms in the stable, the deep rumbling complaints of the camels being loaded in the courtyard below. Let us drift down to that courtyard now, where the real work of departure is underway. The camels stand in patient rows, their great heads swaying gently, their eyes half closed with ancient calm. These are Bactrian camels, the 2-humped breed of Central Asia, shaggy and immense, bred for 1,000 years to carry impossible loads across impossible distances. Their coats are thick and tawny, shedding now in ragged patches as spring turns toward summer. Each camel can carry 400 pounds of goods and walk for days without water, and they regard the bustling humans around them with the mild contempt of creatures who know they are indispensable. The camel master is a man named Bahram, quiet and sun-darkened, with hands that move over the animals with the sureness of long practice. He has worked for Variz's family for 20 years, and he knows these camels by name, by temperament, by the particular sound of each one's breathing. He speaks to them in a low murmur as he checks the loading of each pack, adjusting the balance of the heavy wooden frames that distribute the weight across the animals' backs. Watch now as the goods are loaded, and imagine the treasure that will travel east. First come the bolts of sogdian silk, not the fine Chinese silk they will purchase at journey's end, but the heavier, patterned weaves that Samarkand is famous for, dyed in rich reds and golds. Then come sacks of dried apricots and raisins from the valley orchards, their sweetness concentrated by the desert sun. There are small clay jars of precious saffron, sealed with wax, each jar worth its weight in silver. There are blocks of sal ammoniac, used by metal workers and dyers across the world. There are bundles of fine wool, glass beads from Persia, small bottles of rose attar, and, carefully wrapped in layers of felt, a set of silver drinking vessels commissioned by a wealthy Chinese official who has been waiting 3 years for their arrival. Faranak watches the loading from the gallery above, checking each item against her ledger, making small marks with a brush. Her father appears beside her, and for a moment they stand together in comfortable silence, watching the organized chaos below. Vahriz speaks quietly, telling his daughter that they will travel with a caravan of 12 other merchants, joining together for safety and companionship. They will have 40 camels between them, plus horses for the riders and pack mules for the rougher mountain sections. By the time they reach Kashgar, the caravan will have grown to perhaps 100 animals, as more traders join from the smaller towns along the way. Faranak nods, her eyes still on the courtyard. She asks how long the journey will take, how many days until they see the gates of Chang'an. Her father smiles, the lines around his eyes deepening. He tells her that it will take many months. They will cross mountain passes still deep in snow. They will skirt the edge of the great Taklamakan Desert, that sea of sand where even the wind loses its way. They will rest in caravanserais and oasis towns, and they will arrive in Chang'an when the autumn leaves are falling if the road is kind, and then they will winter there and return home by the following spring. A year then, a full turning of the seasons. Faranak feels something flutter in her chest, excitement and a thread of fear, and beneath it all, a deep and quiet readiness. She has waited her whole life for this. Before any journey, there must be a blessing. The Sogdians are followers of the prophet Zoroaster, and their faith is one of light and fire, of truth and righteous action. In every Sogdian city, a fire temple stands at the heart of the community, and the sacred flame within has been burning for generations, fed by the prayers of the faithful and the fragrant wood of sandalwood and juniper. Let us follow Vahriz and Faranak now, as they walk through the waking streets toward the fire temple of Samarkand. The streets are narrow here, paved with worn stones that have felt the footsteps of countless travelers. The houses rise close on either side, their upper stories leaning toward each other as if sharing secrets. Merchants are opening their shops, rolling back the wooden shutters to reveal the treasures within. Carpets in jeweled colors, copper pots that gleam like captured sunlight, trays of flat bread still warm from the oven. The smell of baking bread mingles with the sharper scent of spices, cumin, coriander, the warm bite of pepper. The fire temple stands at the end of a quiet square, its entrance marked by a simple arch carved with the winged symbol of Ahura Mazda, the Lord of Light. The building itself is modest, plastered walls, a domed roof, a small garden where roses bloom in terracotta pots. But there is something in the air here, a quality of stillness, that makes both Variz and Faranak slow their steps as they approach. They remove their shoes at the threshold and step inside. The interior is cool and dim, lit only by the glow of the sacred fire. The fire burns in a great bronze vessel at the center of the room, its flames dancing in shades of gold and amber, casting moving shadows on the whitewashed walls. The air is thick with the scent of sandalwood, sweet and woody and ancient. Around the fire, the priests in their white robes move slowly, their lips forming the words of prayers that have been spoken for 1,000 years. Variz and Faranak stand together at the back of the temple, their heads bowed. The fire crackles softly, and the smoke rises toward a small opening in the dome, carrying the prayers of the faithful up toward the heavens. Variz speaks quietly, his voice almost lost in the murmur of the flames. He offers a prayer for safe travels, for fair winds and honest dealing. He prays for his daughter, that she may see the wonders of the world and return home safely to tell of them. He prays for his late wife, whose spirit he believes watches over them still. Faranak does not speak, but she feels the warmth of the fire on her face, and something in her heart grows quiet. She thinks of her mother, who never traveled farther than the orchards outside the city walls, but who always listened with shining eyes to the tales of distant lands. She thinks of the journey ahead, the unknown roads and unfamiliar faces, and she feels for the first time that she is ready. The priests approach them with small offerings, a pinch of sandalwood to cast into the flames, a sip of consecrated water. Variz and Faranak accept these gifts with bowed heads, and when they turn to leave, the first true light of morning is streaming through the temple door. The day has begun. The road is waiting. The caravan gathers at the eastern gate of Samarkand, where the road runs straight and dusty toward the rising sun. The other merchants are already assembled, men and women from a dozen different families, some traveling with servants and guards, others with only a single camel and their own 2 hands. There are Sogdians like Variz, but also Persians, Indians, a quiet Tibetan monk making his slow way home, and a Byzantine trader with pale eyes and a gift for languages. The camels grumble and shift, their bells chiming softly as they move. The horses stamp and toss their heads, eager to be gone. Children from the city have gathered to watch the departure, their faces bright with excitement, and the merchants' families stand in small clusters, offering final embraces and whispered blessings. Variz's brother clasps his arm firmly, speaking of safe roads and swift return. His sister-in-law presses a small bundle into Faranak's hands, dried fruit and sweet pastries for the first days of travel, wrapped in a cloth embroidered with protective symbols. Faranak tucks the bundle into her saddlebag and embraces her aunt tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of rose water and home. And then, With a call from the caravan master and a great creaking of harnesses and wooden frames, the caravan begins to move. The motion is slow at first, almost dreamlike. The camels sway like ships on a gentle sea, their long legs eating the distance with deceptive ease. The horses fall into line, their riders settling into the rhythm of the road. Behind them, Samarkand's blue domes grow smaller and smaller until at last they disappear beyond a rise in the land, and there is only the road ahead. Faranak rides beside her father, her horse a steady gray mare with a calm disposition. She turns in her saddle for one last look at the city of her birth, but it is already gone, hidden by the folds of the land. She faces forward again, and the wind catches her scarf, and she feels the vastness of the world opening before her like a great unwritten book. The road runs east through a landscape of rolling hills and scattered farms. Apricot orchards line the way, their branches heavy with unripe fruit. Shepherds watch from distant hillsides, their flocks like clouds of cream against the green grass. The sky is immense, a pale, washed blue that seems to go on forever, and the only sounds are the creak of the harnesses, the soft chime of the camel bells, and the murmur of conversation among the travelers. Let yourself settle into this rhythm now, the gentle sway of the journey. Feel the sun on your face and the wind at your back. The road is long, but there is no need to hurry. Each step brings new wonders, and the caravan moves as it has moved for centuries, patient, steady, trusting in the road. For 10 days, the caravan travels east through the foothills of the great mountains, climbing gradually as the land rises toward the roof of the world. The air grows thinner and cooler, and the orchards give way to forests of juniper and wild walnut, then to high meadows carpeted with wildflowers, purple vetch, yellow buttercups, the delicate white stars of edelweiss. The nights grow cold. The travelers make camp in sheltered valleys, pitching their felt tents in circles around the fires. They share food and stories, the flames casting long shadows as the stars emerge in their thousands overhead. Faranak has never seen stars like this, so bright, so close, as if she could reach up and gather them in her hands. She sits beside her father, wrapped in a thick wool blanket, listening to the other travelers speak of their homelands and their hopes. The Byzantine merchant tells of Constantinople, the great city on the water, where the emperor's palace shimmers with gold and the markets overflow with goods from every corner of the earth. The Tibetan monk speaks softly of the high plateau where he was born, the thin air and the prayer flags snapping in the wind, the monasteries perched on mountainsides like eagles' nests. Bahram, the camel master, sits apart, checking the animals' feet for stones, speaking to them in his low murmur. The camels are well suited to this terrain. Their broad, padded feet grip the rocky trails with ease, and their shaggy coats protect them from the cold. But the horses require more care, and Bahram walks among them each evening, running his hands along their legs, checking for swelling or strain. The passes are the most difficult part of the journey. The trails narrow to single file, winding along cliff edges, where a single misstep could send rider and mount tumbling into the abyss. The caravan slows to a crawl, each traveler focused on the path beneath their feet, trusting in the sure-footedness of their animals and the guidance of those who have walked this way before. But there is beauty here too, a wild, fierce beauty that takes the breath away. Snow-capped peaks rise on every side, their glaciers gleaming blue and white in the sunlight. Waterfalls cascade from hidden heights, their spray catching rainbows in the thin air. Eagles circle overhead, riding the thermals with effortless grace. Faranak pauses at a high overlook, her mare breathing hard from the climb. Below her, the valley falls away in a tumble of green and gray, and in the distance she can see the road they have traveled winding back toward the west like a pale ribbon. Above her, the peaks pierce the sky, ancient and unmoved by the small procession of humans and animals passing at their feet. She thinks of all the travelers who have passed this way before her, the merchants and monks, the soldiers and scholars, the dreamers and wanderers who have looked upon these same mountains and felt this same awe. She is part of a great river of humanity flowing endlessly between east and west, carrying goods and ideas and stories across the barriers of stone and snow. Her father appears beside her, his own horse steaming in the cold air. He says nothing, only looks out at the view, and Faranak knows that he is thinking of all the times he has stood in this very place, watching the world spread out beneath him. After a long moment, he turns to her and smiles, and they ride on together, descending toward the gentler lands below. After 3 weeks of travel, the caravan descends from the mountains into the Tarim Basin, and the landscape transforms. The green meadows and forested slopes give way to dry scrubland, then to true desert, a sea of tawny sand and gravel stretching to every horizon. The air is hot and still, heavy with dust, and the sun beats down with an intensity that Faranak has never experienced. But there, shimmering in the distance like a dream, is the great oasis of Kashgar. Kashgar is the crossroads of the Silk Road, the place where the northern and southern routes around the terrible Taklamakan converge. Caravans from China, India, Persia, and beyond all pass through its gates, and the city has grown rich on the trade. Its markets are legendary, a labyrinth of covered bazaars where anything and everything can be bought or sold, from Chinese silk to Indian spices to the famed Khotanese jade. The caravan enters the city through the western gate, and Faranak finds herself surrounded by a chaos of sound and color and smell. The streets are narrow and winding, shaded by awnings of bright fabric that ripple in the hot breeze. Vendors call out their wares in a babel of languages: Sogdian, Chinese, Turkic, Persian, Sanskrit. The air smells of roasting meat and fresh bread, of incense and animal dung, of ripe melons and the sharp tang of leather. They make their way to a large caravanserai near the central bazaar, a fortified inn built around a central courtyard where travelers can stable their animals and store their goods in safety. The building is ancient, its mud brick walls thick and cool, its wooden galleries shading the rooms that open onto the courtyard below. A fountain splashes in the center, and the sound of the water is like music after the dry silence of the road. Faranak helps Bahram settle the camels in the stable, pouring water into the troughs and checking the animals for sores or injuries. The camels drink deeply, their great lips rippling, their eyes half closed with contentment. She strokes the neck of her favorite, an old female named Dust, and Dust turns her head and huffs warm breath against Faranak's cheek. That evening, Vahriz takes his daughter to the night market. The bazaar is transformed after dark. Oil lamps and candles flicker from every stall, casting pools of golden light across the heaped goods. Musicians play on corners, their instruments strange and beautiful, long-necked lutes, drums stretched with animal skin, flutes that seem to weep. Acrobats tumble in small, cleared spaces, their bodies impossibly flexible, and storytellers gather crowds with tales of heroes and demons and the magical lands beyond the edge of the world. Faranak walks beside her father, her eyes wide, trying to take it all in. She sees bolts of silk in every color imaginable, crimson and saffron, jade green and deep indigo. She sees carpets so finely woven they seem to shimmer like water. She sees trays of jewelry, gold and silver, turquoise and coral, pearls the size of grapes. She sees spices heaped in pyramids, their colors rich as autumn leaves, the warm orange of turmeric, the deep red of chili, the pale gold of cumin. Variz guides her through the maze, pointing out the different sections of the market. Here are the silk merchants, there the dealers in jade. This alley is for spices, that one for metalwork. The animal market is beyond the eastern wall, where horses and camels and even elephants are bought and sold. The slave market, which Faranak has no wish to see, is in a separate quarter, hidden from the main thoroughfares. They stop at a tea stall, and Variz orders cups of fragrant green tea, pale and steaming. They sit on low cushions, watching the flow of humanity pass by, and Variz speaks softly of the work that lies ahead, the negotiations, the assessments of quality, the delicate dance of price and counterprice that is the merchant's art. Faranak listens, but her eyes keep drifting back to the market, to the endless variety of faces and goods and sounds. She has read about these things in her ledgers, calculated their prices and weights, but she has never truly understood until now. The Silk Road is not just a road. It is a river of human longing, flowing between the worlds, carrying the dreams of 1,000 different peoples toward shores they will never see. The caravan rests in Kashgar for 5 days, taking on supplies and new companions for the next leg of the journey. When they depart, their numbers have swelled. There are now nearly 100 camels, plus horses and mules, and a small flock of sheep that a Tibetan trader is driving to market in China. The road runs southeast now, skirting the edge of the Taklamakan Desert. The Taklamakan is one of the most forbidding places on earth, a vast expanse of shifting sand dunes where temperatures soar by day and plummet by night, where water is so scarce that even the hardiest travelers can die of thirst within days. Its name, in the old Turkic tongue, means, "You go in, you do not come out." The caravan will not enter the Taklamakan directly. Instead, they will follow the southern route, hopping from oasis to oasis along the foothills of the great mountains that rim the basin. These oases are islands of green in a sea of brown and gold, fed by rivers that flow down from the glaciers above. Each one is a miracle, a small garden of life clinging to existence at the edge of the void. The first oasis they reach is the ancient town of Yarkand. It is smaller than Kashgar, but no less vital, a cluster of mud brick buildings surrounded by fields of wheat and orchards of apricot. The people here are farmers and traders, their lives shaped by the rhythm of the seasons and the demands of the road. They welcome the caravan with quiet hospitality, offering food and water and a place to rest. The days take on a new rhythm now. The caravan rises before dawn, when the air is still cool and the stars are fading in the west. They travel through the morning, covering as much distance as possible before the heat of midday becomes unbearable. Then they rest in whatever shade they can find, the shadow of a cliff, the shelter of a crumbling watchtower, the cool interior of a caravanserai, waiting for the worst of the heat to pass. In the late afternoon, they travel again, continuing until darkness falls and the stars emerge. Faranak learns to read the desert as Bahram does. She learns to watch for the subtle signs of water, the way the sand changes color, the presence of certain plants, the behavior of the birds. She learns to wrap her face against the dust storms that blow without warning, filling the air with grit so thick you cannot see your hand before your face. She learns to trust the camels who can smell water from miles away and whose instincts have been honed by generations of desert crossing. The landscape is stark but beautiful. The dunes rise in great waves of gold and amber, their crests sharpened by the wind into knife edges that seem to glow at sunset. The sky is enormous, a bowl of blue by day, a tapestry of stars by night, and the silence is so profound that Faranak can hear her own heartbeat in her ears. At night, around the fires, the travelers share stories to pass the time. Vahriz speaks of the history of the road, of the Han Dynasty ambassadors who first forged these paths 2,000 years ago, of the Buddhist monks who carried their faith from India to China and back again. He speaks of the goods that have flowed along these routes, not just silk and spices, but ideas and inventions, religions and philosophies, music and art. The Silk Road is a thread that binds the world together, he says, and every traveler who walks it adds a new strand to the weave. After many days of travel, the caravan reaches Khotan, the legendary city of jade. Khotan sits at the foot of the Kunlun Mountains, where two rivers flow down from the glaciers to create a lush oasis in the midst of the desert. The city has been famous for its jade for over 2,000 years, the pale green and creamy white stones prized by the emperors of China, carved into ornaments and ritual objects and symbols of power. The caravan enters through gates of weathered wood, and the streets within are cool and shaded, lined with channels of clear water that feed the gardens and orchards. The sound of flowing water is everywhere, a gentle music that seems to wash away the dust and heat of the road. Faranak walks with her father through the jade market, where craftsmen sit in open workshops, their hands moving with practiced precision over blocks of raw stone. The jade comes in many colors, white as mutton fat, green as new leaves, gray as river mist, and the artisans shape it into beads and bangles, figurines and pendants, intricate belt hooks and hairpins. The work is slow and painstaking, requiring years of training, and the finished pieces glow with a warmth that seems to come from within the stone itself. Vahriz pauses at one workshop, exchanging words with the master craftsman in a mixture of Sogdian and the local tongue. The man is old, his fingers gnarled but sure, and he shows them a piece he has been working on for 6 months. A small horse, no larger than a child's fist, every muscle and tendon rendered with breathtaking realism. Faranak looks at the horse and sees the animals she has traveled with, their strength and patience and quiet dignity captured forever in pale green stone. They spend 2 nights in Khotan, resting and restocking supplies. Faranak wanders the markets, practicing her bargaining in broken Turkic, tasting unfamiliar foods, dumplings filled with lamb and onion, flatbread baked on the walls of clay ovens, sweet dried mulberries that melt on the tongue. She buys a small jade pendant for herself, a simple disc carved with a lotus flower, and strings it on a leather cord around her neck. The lotus, her father tells her, is a symbol of purity and enlightenment. It grows from the mud at the bottom of the pond, rising through the murky water to bloom in the sunlight above. It reminds us that beauty can emerge from darkness, that the soul can rise above the circumstances of its birth. Faranak holds the cool stone in her hand and thinks of the journey she is on, the rising from the familiar into the unknown, the slow climb towards something she cannot yet name. She tucks the pendant beneath her collar, close to her heart, and feels its weight like a promise. The road continues east, and the landscape grows ever more dramatic. The mountains to the north rise higher and more jagged, their peaks lost in clouds of snow. The desert to the south shimmers with heat, mirage pools appearing and vanishing on the horizon like restless spirits. And then, one afternoon, the Flaming Mountains appear. They rise abruptly from the desert floor, a wall of red sandstone that stretches for nearly 100 kilometers from east to west. The stone is ancient, laid down in layers over millions of years, and erosion has carved it into a fantasy of ridges and gullies, towers and canyons, but it is the color that takes the breath away. In the light of late afternoon, the mountains seem to burn. The red sandstone glows with an inner fire, shifting through shades of copper and rust, vermilion and gold. The gullies catch the shadows, deepening to purple and black, while the ridges blaze with light. It is as if the earth itself has caught flame, frozen forever in the moment of combustion. The caravan halts, and the travelers stand in silence, gazing at the spectacle before them. Even the camels seem affected, their great heads turning toward the mountains as if sensing something beyond the ordinary. Faranak has heard stories of this place. The Chinese call them Huoyan Shan, the Flaming Mountains, and they feature in the ancient tales of the monk Xuanzang, who traveled to India to bring back the Buddhist scriptures. In the stories, the mountains were created by a demon's fire, and only the magic of a heavenly general could extinguish them long enough for the pilgrims to pass. But standing here now, Faranak does not think of demons or magic. She thinks only of the beauty, terrible and wonderful, indifferent to human meaning, existing for its own sake alone. The mountains do not care that she is watching. They have burned like this for millions of years, and they will burn for millions more, long after she and everyone she knows has turned to dust. There is something comforting in this thought. The world is so much larger than any single life, so much older, so much stranger, and yet here she is, a small woman on a small horse, witnessing this wonder. Her presence does not diminish the mountains, and the mountains do not diminish her. They simply exist together in this moment. The caravan makes camp that evening in the shadow of the Flaming Mountains, and the travelers watch as the light fades and the colors shift through their final transformations, from gold to copper to deep purple to black. The stars emerge, and the mountains become silhouettes against the sky, their fire extinguished until the sun returns. Faranak lies in her tent, listening to the wind move over the rocks, and she falls asleep to the sound of distant camel bells, dreaming of flames that do not burn and journeys that never end. Beyond the Flaming Mountains, the road winds through the oasis towns of Turpan and Hami, each one a small miracle of water and green in the vast brown expanse. The days blur together in a rhythm of travel and rest, of sun and stars, of the endless swaying of the caravan. And then, after many weeks, they reach Dunhuang. Dunhuang is the gateway to China proper, the last oasis before the road passes through the Jade Gate and enters the heartland of the Tang Empire. It has been a vital stop on the Silk Road for 1,000 years, and it is home to one of the greatest wonders of the ancient world, the Mogao Caves, the caves of 1,000 Buddhas. But first, there is the desert itself. The dunes near Dunhuang are called Mingsha Shan, the Singing Sands. They rise in great golden waves, smooth as water, their crests razor-sharp against the sky, and when the wind blows, they sing. Faranak hears it first at dusk as the caravan approaches the oasis. A low humming rises from the dunes, a sound like distant thunder or the drone of a great bell. The sound swells and fades, rises and falls, as if the desert itself is breathing. The camel's ears prick forward, and the travelers fall silent, listening. The singing is caused by the movement of the sand, the grains sliding over one another in the wind, creating vibrations that resonate through the dunes. But knowing the cause does not diminish the wonder. There is something ancient in that sound, something that predates human language, human music, human thought. The caravan makes camp at the edge of the oasis, where palm trees and willows mark the presence of water. In the morning, Faranak rises before the others and walks out into the dunes alone. The sand is cool beneath her feet, still holding the chill of the night. She climbs the nearest dune, her feet sinking with each step, the sand whispering beneath her weight. At the crest, she pauses and looks out. The dunes roll away to the horizon, wave after wave of gold and amber, their surfaces rippled by the wind into patterns that seem almost deliberately beautiful. The sun is just rising, and the light catches the tops of the dunes, turning them to fire while the valleys remain in shadow. And there, nestled among the dunes like a jewel in a setting of gold, is Crescent Moon Lake. The lake is shaped exactly like a crescent moon, a curve of water so blue it hurts to look at. Willows and poplars ring its shores, their leaves reflected perfectly in the still surface. A small pagoda stands at one end, its roof curving upward toward the sky. Faranak stands at the top of the dune, looking down at this impossible beauty, and she feels tears prick at her eyes. She does not know why she is crying. Perhaps it is the exhaustion of the journey. Perhaps it is the strangeness of being so far from home. Perhaps it is simply the overwhelming loveliness of this place, this moment, this life. She descends the dune and walks to the edge of the lake. The water is clear and cool, fed by a spring deep beneath the sand. She kneels and cups her hands, lifting the water to her lips. It tastes of minerals and earth, of the deep places of the world. She sits by the lake until the sun is fully risen and the heat of the day begins to build. Then she rises, brushes the sand from her clothes, and returns to the caravan. There is still far to go. The Mogao Caves lie a few miles south of Dunhuang, carved into a cliff face that rises above a dry riverbed. As the caravan approaches, Faranak sees the cliff for the first time. A wall of tan and gray rock, pocked with hundreds of dark openings like the cells of a great honeycomb. These are the cave temples, and they are one of the wonders of the world. For over 300 years, monks and patrons have been carving caves into this cliff, filling them with statues and paintings dedicated to the Buddha and his teachings. There are now nearly 500 caves, ranging from small meditation cells to vast temple halls, and they contain some of the most beautiful art ever created by human hands. Vahris has been here many times before, and he serves as Faranak's guide. They leave their animals with Bahram and climb the wooden walkways that zigzag up the cliff face, leading from cave to cave. The first cave they enter is small, lit only by the daylight filtering through the door, but as Faranak's eyes adjust, she gasps. The walls are covered with paintings, figures of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, celestial musicians and dancing spirits, scenes from the scriptures and the lives of the saints. The colors are rich and vivid, even after centuries: lapis lazuli blue, malachite green, cinnabar red, gold leaf that still gleams in the dim light. The figures seem to move in the flickering shadows, their faces serene, their hands raised in gestures of blessing and teaching. At the back of the cave, a great Buddha sits in meditation, carved from the living rock and covered in gold. His eyes are half closed, his lips curved in a gentle smile, his hands resting in his lap in the gesture of perfect peace. He is enormous, 20 feet tall, perhaps more, and yet there is something intimate about him, something tender. He seems to be looking directly at Faranak, seeing her completely, accepting her exactly as she is. She stands before the statue for a long time, not praying exactly, but simply being. The silence of the cave wraps around her like a blanket. The scent of old incense lingers in the air, and for a moment the endless chatter of her mind falls quiet, and there is only this: the golden Buddha, the painted walls, the cool dim stillness of this sacred place. They visit other caves throughout the day. Some are vast, with ceilings that soar overhead covered with thousands of tiny Buddhas painted in rows. Some are small and jewel-like, every surface decorated with exquisite detail. In one cave, a reclining Buddha stretches for nearly 100 feet, his eyes closed in the peace of final nirvana. In another, a great wheel of life depicts the endless cycle of birth and death, suffering and liberation. Vahris tells her that monks from across Asia have traveled here, from India and Tibet, from Korea and Japan, from distant lands she has never heard of. They have brought their own traditions, their own artistic styles, their own understanding of the Buddha's teachings, and all of it has been preserved here in this unlikely place at the edge of the desert, protected by the dry air and the isolation of the road. As the sun begins to set, Faranak climbs to a high walkway and looks out over the valley. The cliff glows golden in the evening light, and the dark mouths of the caves seem to breathe with ancient wisdom. Somewhere below, a monk is chanting, his voice rising and falling in the gathering dusk. She thinks of all the travelers who have stopped here over the centuries, merchants like her father, pilgrims seeking enlightenment, soldiers and scholars, and wanderers of every kind. They have come from everywhere and nowhere, and they have left a piece of themselves in these caves, in the paintings and statues, in the prayers and the silence. She is part of that great river now. Her footsteps have joined the countless others, and when she leaves this place, she will carry something of it with her, a gift of beauty and peace that will remain long after the journey is done. Beyond Dunhuang, the road passes through the Jade Gate, Yumenguan, the ancient frontier of the Chinese Empire. The gate itself is a crumbling watchtower of rammed earth, weathered by centuries of wind and sun. In the time of the Han Dynasty, this was the edge of the known world, the point beyond which China's power did not extend. Soldiers were stationed here to guard the border, and travelers were required to present their documents before being allowed to pass. Now, in the Tang Dynasty, the empire has expanded far beyond this old frontier. The watchtower is unmanned, its walls slowly dissolving back into the desert from which they came. But there is still something powerful about passing through this gate, about crossing the invisible line that separates the world of the steppes from the world of China. Faranak rides through the gate in silence, her eyes on the horizon ahead. The landscape is changing again, the pure desert giving way to dry grassland, then to cultivated fields fed by irrigation canals. Villages appear, each one larger than the last, their houses made of fired brick instead of mud, their inhabitants speaking in the liquid tones of Chinese. The road itself improves, widening and smoothing as they approach the heartland of the empire. Way stations appear at regular intervals, offering food and fresh horses to official messengers and wealthy travelers. The caravan moves faster now, covering more distance each day, drawn onward by the promise of journey's end. The days grow shorter and cooler. The trees along the road blaze with autumn color, red and gold and orange, like the Flaming Mountains made into leaves. The air smells of wood smoke and fallen fruit, of harvest and the coming cold. And then, one morning, rising from the plain ahead, the walls of Chang'an appear. Chang'an is the largest city in the world. More than 1 million people live within its walls, Chinese and Sogdians, Persians and Indians, Koreans and Japanese, Turks and Tibetans, and travelers from every corner of the known world. It is the capital of the Tang Empire, the seat of the Son of Heaven, the center of a civilization that considers itself the heart of all creation. The city is laid out in a perfect grid, its streets running straight and wide from gate to gate. The walls are 40 feet high and 20 feet thick, pierced by a dozen massive gates that are closed each night and opened each dawn with the beating of great drums. Within the walls, the city is divided into wards, residential quarters, market districts, government precincts, each one a city unto itself with its own walls and gates. The caravan enters through the western gate, joining a stream of travelers that flows into the city like a river. Faranak stares at everything, her head turning constantly, trying to take it all in. The streets are crowded with people of every description, officials in flowing silk robes, monks in saffron and gray, soldiers in leather armor, merchants and craftsmen and beggars and thieves. Sedan chairs jostle with ox carts and loaded camels. The noise is tremendous, a roar of voices and hooves and wheels, of vendors crying their wares and musicians playing for coins, of dogs barking and children laughing and the endless bustle of a city that never sleeps. They make their way to the Western Market, the great trading district where foreign merchants are permitted to do business. The market covers an enormous area divided into hundreds of specialized lanes and alleys. Here are the silk dealers, there the spice merchants. Here are the dealers in horses and camels, there the sellers of tea and porcelain. Every conceivable good is for sale. Jade and ivory, gold and silver, furs and feathers, medicines and musical instruments, books and paintings and curiosities from every land. Bahriz has contacts here, fellow Sogdians who have settled in Chang'an and established themselves as middlemen between the Chinese and the merchants of the West. They welcome him warmly, embracing him as a brother, exclaiming over Faranak and praising Vahris for bringing his daughter at last. They are given quarters in a compound near the market, a comfortable house built around a central courtyard, with rooms for the family and storage for the goods. The camels are stabled nearby, where they can rest and recover from the long journey. That first night in Chang'an, Faranak cannot sleep. She lies on her bed, listening to the sounds of the city, so different from the silence of the desert, the quiet of the oases. She hears music drifting from a nearby tavern, laughter and the clink of cups. She hears the night watchman calling the hour, his voice echoing through the empty streets. She hears the distant rumble of the city gates closing, sealing Chang'an into its nighttime quiet. She thinks of all the miles she has traveled to reach this place, the mountains and deserts, the oases and caravanserais, the wonders and hardships of the road. She thinks of her father, asleep in the next room, his breath slow and even. She thinks of her mother, who never saw these things, who only heard the stories. And she thinks of all the travelers who have made this journey before her, century after century, carrying their hopes and fears and dreams across the roof of the world. Sleep comes at last, soft and deep, and Faranak dreams of nothing at all. The weeks that follow are filled with work. Vahris and Faranak spend their days in the market, meeting with buyers and negotiating prices. The silver vessels they have carried from Samarkand are delivered to the Chinese official who commissioned them, and he pays handsomely, praising the craftsmanship and ordering more for the following year. The Sogdian silk is sold to a dealer who will resell it to the textile workshops of the imperial court. The spices and dried fruits find ready buyers among the city's wealthy households. In exchange, they purchase goods to carry back west. Chinese silk is the most valuable, the fine lustrous fabric that has given the road its name. They buy bolts of plain silk and embroidered silk, damask and brocade, gauze so fine it seems woven from spider threads. They buy tea, carefully packed in sealed containers to preserve its freshness. They buy paper, that miraculous Chinese invention, lighter and smoother than parchment. They buy lacquerware and porcelain, bronze mirrors and jade ornaments. Faranak keeps careful records of every transaction, her brushes moving quickly over the paper. She learns to read the Chinese characters that mark the bales and boxes, to recognize the seals of the merchants and the stamps of the customs officials. She learns to tell good silk from poor by the way it catches the light, to judge tea by its color and fragrance, to estimate the weight of a bolt by the way it sits in her hands. But there is time for more than work. In the evenings they explore the city, wandering through its many districts. They visit temples and gardens, markets and tea houses. They watch performances of Chinese opera, the singers' voices rising in strange and beautiful melodies. They eat foods Faranak has never tasted, delicate dumplings, noodles in savory broth, roasted duck with crisp skin and tender flesh. One afternoon, Vahris takes Faranak to see the Wild Goose Pagoda, a great tower of brick and stone that rises above the rooftops like a beacon. It was built to house the scriptures that the monk Xuanzang brought back from India, the same monk whose journey inspired the legends of the Flaming Mountains. They climb the narrow stairs to the top, and from there they can see the entire city spread out before them. The grid of streets, the tiled roofs, the green patches of gardens and parks. Beyond the walls, the yellow plains stretch away to the mountains on the horizon. Vahriz speaks quietly, telling his daughter that he came here for the first time when he was young, not much older than she is now. He was traveling with his own father, learning the trade just as she is learning it now. And when he stood in this very spot and looked out at the city, he felt something shift inside him, an understanding that the world was vast beyond imagining, and that a lifetime would not be enough to see it all. Faranak nods, understanding. She feels the same thing now, standing here beside him, a hunger and a humility, a longing and a peace. The world is so much larger than she ever knew, and she is so small within it. But that smallness is not a burden, it is a gift. Autumn deepens into winter, and the caravan remains in Chang'an. The weather turns cold, and snow falls on the city, transforming it into a world of white and silence. The markets grow quieter, the streets less crowded. The travelers who filled the roads in summer have settled in their winter quarters, waiting for the spring thaw that will open the passes again. Variz and Faranak spend the long evenings by the fire, talking and reading and planning for the journey home. They have done well this season. Their goods have sold for good prices, and their purchases will fetch even better prices in the markets of the West. But more than the profit, Faranak values what she has learned, what she has seen, what she has become. She is not the same person who left Samarkand in the spring. The road has changed her, as it changes everyone who walks it. She has seen wonders she could never have imagined, mountains of fire and seas of sand, caves full of golden Buddhas, and cities full of strangers. She has learned to read the desert and the market, to bargain and to listen, to trust her instincts and her animals and the kindness of strangers. And she has come to understand something about her father, about the life he has led, the journeys he has taken, the wisdom he has gathered along the way. He is not just a merchant buying and selling goods. He is a thread in the great tapestry of the Silk Road, connecting peoples and cultures, carrying ideas and inventions across the barriers of language and distance. His work matters, not because of the profit it brings, but because of the bridges it builds. The winter solstice passes, and the days begin to lengthen again. The snow melts, and the first green shoots appear in the gardens. The caravanserais begin to fill with travelers preparing for the spring journey, checking their animals and loading their goods. It is time to go home. The journey west is different from the journey east. The landscapes are familiar now, the challenges known. The caravan retraces its steps through the Jade Gate, past Dunhuang and its singing sands, along the edge of the terrible Taklamakan. They pass through Khotan and Kashgar, over the mountain passes, down into the green valleys of Sogdiana. But familiarity does not diminish the wonder. If anything, Faranak sees the land more clearly now, noticing details she missed before. She sees how the oases depend on the delicate network of irrigation channels, how a single blocked canal can mean the death of a village. She sees how the caravanserais are placed at precise intervals, a day's journey apart, creating a lifeline across the empty lands. She sees the tracks of other caravans in the sand, the evidence of the countless travelers who have walked this way before. She also sees how the road has changed her relationship with her father. They talk more easily now, sharing observations and memories, planning for future journeys. He asks her opinion on business matters, listens to her assessments of quality and price. She is no longer just his daughter, his assistant, his student. She is his partner. The winter was long, but the spring comes early, and the road is gentle. The passes are clear of snow by the time the caravan reaches them, and the rivers are full of meltwater singing in their beds. The meadows are carpeted with wildflowers, and the air smells of new grass and warming earth. They travel through landscapes of breathtaking beauty, high valleys ringed with snow-capped peaks, forests of juniper and wild fruit, villages where children run out to watch the caravan pass. Faranak stores up these images in her memory, knowing that she will carry them with her forever, the colors and sounds, the tastes and smells, the feeling of the road beneath her feet. On a morning in late spring, the caravan crests a final rise, and there below them lies the valley of the Zeravshan, green and golden in the early light, and there, at the heart of the valley, is Samarkand. The blue domes shine in the sunlight, just as Faranak remembers. The orchards are in bloom, clouds of white and pink blossom trembling in the breeze. The air smells of flowers and water and home. The caravan descends into the valley, and the road becomes familiar. There is the orchard where she played as a child. There is the canal where she learned to swim. There is the village where her grandmother was born. There is the hill where the fire temple stands against the sky. They enter the city through the eastern gate, and the streets are full of people who know them, neighbors and friends, relatives and business partners. Word of their arrival has preceded them, and the family compound is crowded with well-wishers, eager to hear the stories, to see the goods, to welcome the travelers home. Faranak's aunt embraces her fiercely, tears streaming down her cheeks. Her young cousins cling to her legs, demanding presents and stories. The servants bustle about, preparing food and drink, unloading the animals, making everything ready. And in the midst of it all, Vahri stands quietly, watching his daughter with pride. She moves through the crowd with new confidence, greeting each person, answering questions, distributing small gifts she has brought from Chang'an. She is changed, grown, become somehow more herself. The journey has done its work. That evening, when the visitors have gone and the household is quiet, father and daughter sit together in the courtyard under the stars. The fountain murmurs softly, and the scent of jasmine drifts in from the garden. Vaharis asks his daughter if she is glad to be home. Faranak considers the question. She is glad to see her family, to sleep in her own bed, to eat the food she grew up with. But she is also something else, something harder to name, restless perhaps, or hungry. She has tasted the vastness of the world, and she cannot untaste it. She tells her father that she is glad, but that she is also already thinking of the next journey. There are routes she has not traveled, cities she has not seen. There is still so much to learn. Vahri smiles in the darkness. He tells her that this is the way of the road. Once you have walked it, it never lets you go. It lives inside you, calling you back, drawing you forward. And that is not a curse. It is a blessing. They sit in silence for a while, listening to the fountain and the night birds and the distant sounds of the city settling into sleep. The stars wheel slowly overhead, the same stars that shine over Chang'an and Dunhuang, over the Flaming Mountains and the Taklamakan, over all the countless miles they have traveled together. And somewhere in the darkness, a camel bell chimes once and falls silent. And so we come to the end of our journey, though the road itself has no end. Let yourself drift now, following the thread of the Silk Road as it winds across the map of the world. See the caravans moving in their slow procession, carrying silk and spices, paper and porcelain, ideas and dreams. See the oasis towns glittering like jewels in the vast brown desert, their gardens fed by water from the distant mountains. See the caravanserais with their welcoming fires, their courtyards full of travelers from every land. The Silk Road was never just a road. It was a web of connections, a river of exchange, a bridge between worlds. For over 1,000 years, it carried the treasures of East and West back and forth across the most forbidding landscapes on earth, connecting peoples who would otherwise never have known of each other's existence. The merchants who walked it were not just traders, they were carriers of civilization, seeds of change scattered on the winds of commerce. The ideas they carried, religions and philosophies, technologies and arts, shaped the world as surely as the goods they sold, and the journeys they made, repeated year after year, generation after generation, created bonds of understanding that outlasted empires. Vahriz will make many more journeys before his traveling days are done. He will see Faranak grow into a master trader in her own right, respected in the markets of Kashgar and Chang'an. He will watch her children and grandchildren take up the family business, carrying the Sogdian name along the ancient roads. And Faranak, she will remember this first journey all her life. She will remember the Flaming Mountains burning in the sunset, the golden Buddhas smiling in their caves, the crescent moon of water lying blue among the golden dunes. She will remember the feel of the road beneath her feet, the sound of the camel bells in the distance, the vast silence of the desert night. But most of all, she will remember the feeling of connection, the sense that she was part of something larger than herself, a great river of human movement flowing between the worlds. She was a thread in the tapestry, a note in the song, a single traveler among countless millions who have walked these roads in search of profit and wisdom, adventure and home.